The bank manager stared at the jar of coins, then laughed, a sharp, humiliating sound that echoed across the lobby. "We're a bank, not a recycling center," he sneered, as the 62-year-old Marine veteran packed up his granddaughter's future in silence. Cameras weren't rolling, yet, but what happened next would ignite a national firestorm. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Mike didn't drive home right away. He sat in his pickup in the bank's parking lot for nearly 10 minutes, staring through the windshield as if waiting for the world to rewind and give him a do-over. His hands trembled, not from age, but from the shame coursing through him like static. It wasn't just the smirk or the laughter. It was the implication that his effort, his dignity, his granddaughter's dreams packed into a tin can were worth less than the plastic plants in the lobby. He reached across the seat, his joints stiff, and turned the ignition. The truck growled awake, coughing like it always did, before settling into a rumble. He didn't crank the AC, let the cab stay hot, let it sting. Back at his modest one-story house on Birch Street, Mike wheeled the cooler over the threshold and set it down just inside the door. He looked at the tin, its faded blue label scratched nearly blank, and for the first time in years, he felt old. Not in the way his knees ached in the morning or how he couldn't sleep past 5 a.m., but old like forgotten furniture, old like a coin no one carries anymore. He poured himself a glass of water, sat at the table. The silence in the house was sharp enough to cut. On the wall, a framed photo of his granddaughter at age 7 beamed down at him, missing 2 front teeth, holding a frog in one hand and a microscope kit in the other. She'd always loved biology. She'd once told him she wanted to find a cure for cancer. He'd told her he believed her. Mike looked down at his calloused hands, the cracks in his nails, the age spots like ink blots across his skin. "Not like this," he muttered aloud. Not after he'd walked through sandstorms, wrenched pallets in freezing warehouses, torn muscles, and coughed blood on mornings he still showed up for work anyway. Not for some smug kid in a suit to laugh him out of a bank like a beggar. Something coiled in his gut, a slow, burning anger that didn't lash out but settled deep and dense. He was not going to let this be the last word. Not for himself. Not for her. He didn't know exactly what he would do yet, but something had shifted. Mike stood up slowly, walked over to the cooler, lifted the tin and carried it to the garage. Under the workbench, he pulled out an old tackle box. From inside it, he removed a notebook he hadn't touched in years. One he used to track side jobs, names, addresses, notes, trustworthy people, ones who paid him fairly, and a few who didn't. He flipped to the last page and tore it out. Then he started writing a new list, not of customers, not of coins, of names. Darren Walsh would be the first, not out of vengeance, out of principle. Mike sat at his kitchen table, letter trembling slightly in his hands. The header alone, United States Department of the Treasury, was enough to make his throat tighten. But it wasn't fear, it was disbelief. After years of being overlooked, passed by, quietly dismissed, someone had finally looked back. And not just anyone. A federal official in Washington had read his name, seen his face, and written a letter that said, "You matter." He read it again. Veteran-friendly coin exchange machines. Free of charge. Free. No minimums. No fees. No rolling, no humiliation, no kid in a tie smirking behind a desk. The tears caught him off guard. Not sobs, he hadn't cried like that since his wife passed, but something smaller, more private. A wetness in the corner of his eyes that he wiped away quickly. It wasn't about him. It had never been about him. It was about a system that forgot the quiet ones. The ones who didn't post angry videos or march in rallies. The ones who just kept going. He looked out the kitchen window. Across the street, 2 neighbors, men in their 30s he barely knew, were hammering a hand-painted sign into their lawn. "We stand with Mike." The words were big, blocky, a little uneven, but they hit like thunder. He turned back to his table. His phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. He didn't even check it. He already had over 70. Messages from reporters, veterans, even a guy who claimed to be starting a GoFundMe to buy Mike a gold-plated coin counter. He ignored them all. The noise didn't matter. The real victory was quieter. Later that evening, as dusk pressed gently against the windows, Emily came by with his granddaughter, Lily. She rushed in like a shot, backpack bouncing, her cheeks red from the chill. "Grandpa, you're famous!" she squealed, hopping up on a kitchen chair. He gave her a tired smile. "I don't know about that." Emily placed a grocery bag on the counter and hugged him tightly. "It's more than that, Dad. You made people feel something, like they weren't invisible." Mike chuckled dryly. "All I did was try to deposit some change." Emily shook her head. "No, you reminded people that respect isn't something you buy. It's something you give, or don't, if you're the manager of a certain bank." Mike didn't answer. He was staring out toward the garage. The cooler sat in there still, silent and unmoved, like a sentry on post. He imagined rolling it down to the library Friday morning. Imagined the click, clack, ping of the coins dropping into the machine, each one a chapter of his labor, each one finally being counted. He glanced at Lily, now digging through her backpack. She pulled out a biology textbook and a hand-drawn diagram of a cell. "Want to see what I learned today?" Mike nodded. "More than anything." As she explained the parts of a mitochondrion with fierce determination, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Pride, yes, but more than that. Momentum. Not viral fame, not political leverage, but the slow, unstoppable current of ordinary people who'd had enough of being treated as afterthoughts. This wasn't about coins anymore. This was about worth. The morning air bit through Mike's coat as he stood outside the Greenville Public Library, a gust tugging at the hem of his Marine Corps dress blues. They no longer fit like they once had, tighter in the shoulders, looser in the waist. But he wore them anyway. Not for spectacle, for memory, for meaning. He hadn't worn the uniform in over a decade, not since his retirement ceremony at Camp Lejeune. But this morning wasn't about endings. It was about reclamation. The red cooler rattled behind him as he pulled it slowly across the pavement. Every bump, every wobble of the wheels seemed to echo louder than usual. People stood on the sidewalk, watching. Some clapped, others saluted. Cameras rolled, microphones thrust forward. Someone shouted a question, but Mike didn't answer. Not out of disrespect, he just didn't have words big enough for the moment. So he walked, measured, steady, carrying with him not just coins, but the quiet weight of every dismissal he'd swallowed over the years. Inside, the library smelled of floor wax and books. Rows of fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and there, near the front window, stood the machine. It was newer than he expected, sleek, touchscreen, with a small American flag sticker on the side that read Veteran Priority Pilot Program. A few staffers stood nearby, clipboard in hand. One, a young woman with a Treasury badge and a nervous smile, nodded to him. "You're Mr. Brennan?" she asked. He nodded once, then lifted the cooler to the machine's bin with a grunt. The lid creaked as he opened it. The coins inside caught the morning light, quarters dulled by time, nickels etched with the grit of decades. Some bore the weight of war, others of lawnmowers and dog walks and midnight drives to repair someone's busted sink. All of them had been earned. He tipped the cooler slowly. The coins cascaded in a thunder of metal, each clink louder than the last. Gasps rippled through the room. The machine beeped. The screen flashed. Numbers began to climb. 189 and 37, 563. Oh, forget sure. 84, Jalton 276 Vati. People behind him watched in silence. A veteran in a Navy cap gave a low whistle. A woman clutched a mason jar to her chest and wiped her eyes. Finally, the screen froze. $3,072.09. A beat passed, then another. Mike stepped back, the weight off his arms, off his chest. He stared at the number, more than he had dared estimate. And then something in him cracked, soft and soundless. He blinked fast, but the tears came anyway. Looks like she's going to college after all, he whispered. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, the kind of noise you don't hear unless you're seen. That afternoon, he entered First Ohio Bank for the last time. The air felt colder inside, sterile. No decorations, no signs, just faint whispers and a hum of fluorescent light. The teller looked up, startled. "I'd like to close my account," he said. The transaction was fast, efficient, no fanfare. He turned to leave, then paused, reached into his coat, handed over a plain white envelope. The teller opened it after he walked out. Inside was a single rolled dollar bill and a note. Respect isn't a policy, it's a choice. M. Brennan, USMC. By the next day, the envelope had made its way to corporate headquarters. By the end of the week, other banks had followed. Quiet policy reversals, quiet restorations of dignity. But Mike didn't watch the news. He sat in a metal folding chair under an overcast sky, front row at Greenville High's football field, watching his granddaughter walk the stage in a cap and gown. She paused mid-step, scanned the crowd, found him. He raised one hand slowly and held up a coin, a 2005 quarter, weathered but gleaming. He didn't shout, he just mouthed, "We did it." And Lily, eyes shining, nodded back.